are both homeschooling parents. Um, and I'll briefly introduce ourselves. And then we have prepared some general information to share with everybody. We're planning to keep it brief, just about 15 minutes of us talking, introducing ourselves, and talking about our experience, and then leave plenty of time for discussion and whatever questions or topics you all are interested in learning more about. So I'll start by briefly introducing myself. So I have two kids in middle school. Both have a visual impairment, and they're um, Braille learners. So not using Braille, but learning Braille. This is our third year homeschooling. We're homeschooling through charter school, it's a public school, public charter school. And previously we were in our neighborhood brick and mortar school. So Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself as well? Thanks for
Sure.
joining us and doing this, by the
No
way.
worries. I'm Michelle. My daughter Emerson just graduated high school a year early. She's finishing up her last semester at our local community before she transfers to UC. I've been homeschooling her her entire education. We did the first 4 years privately, and then we decided to switch to a charter to receive services. My daughter Emerson is fluent in Braille. She reads and writes in Braille. However, she prefers to do school with either audio or large print. Um, she learned Braille, probably it took her, I think, 3 years to be proficient in it. And while she enjoys it, she'd much rather move faster than the Braille allows her to do at this moment in time.
Yeah. Okay, so what we prepared is quickly talking about the options. I know a lot of parents don't even know where to start. And so just kind of what are the different ways that someone can homeschool in California? And then sort of the benefits, some of the misconceptions that people might have about homeschooling. Usually when you're not familiar with a topic, you know, we don't know. So maybe we have assumptions that are not fully right. And most of the time, we're going to be sharing about our own individual experiences homeschooling our kids. So just quickly, and you've already heard this just through our introductions, and I guess Amy, you're maybe in the same boat with us. There's three options that we're aware of to homeschool in California. So one is just on your own. That's called private school affidavit, PSA. You're on your own. You file once a year. There are really no requirements or restrictions other than filing this form once a year. The second option is through a charter school. That's a public school, but it's what's called non-classroom based or online charter school that supports independent study or parent-driven education, homeschooling, basically. So that's the option that I'm doing and that Michelle did. So Michelle started with option one, then moved to option two. And there's a third option, which is if your local district or a neighboring district, depends on how it works, offers this. There are programs, there are hybrid programs where the kid goes to school maybe 3 days a week, and then 2 days is at home with the parent homeschooling. So it's kind of a mix of still getting in-person kind of brick and mortar school, but only half the time. Um, and in addition to these formal pathways, there's really a plethora of resources and options that a lot of homeschooling families use. Some are local in person. There's co-ops, there's learning pods, there's communities. You can organize yourself. I know it sounds hard, but it becomes doable the more familiar you are with it. And then there's also a lot of online instruction. You can use even online schools that are national. Even some universities offer classes for middle schoolers and high schoolers. So there's a lot of resources that homeschooling families um, tap into to really create the education program for their kids.
Mhm.
Um, Anything to add, Michelle?
I would add for the charter school, there's actually kind of two ways to charter. There's one with curriculum already provided, and you follow that curriculum and it's provided. The other way for the charter school is kind of independent, where you're gathering the curriculum that you want your student to use, that you want your student to learn. That goes all the way up through eighth grade. At ninth grade, if your student is planning on going to college, there's an A to G way of going. So you're required at that time to find classes that support that.
Mhm.
So the way I've chartered, our charter school does provide A to G classes, and that is what my daughter has taken so that she could, transfer or right out of high school go to college. Um, so there's a little bit of a variety and a little bit of differences for the charter school. So you can kind of pick what works best for your family and how you want it to do. You can be really, really involved, or you can kind of take a seat back and, work the curriculum that they've already provided.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I didn't know that actually. Um, why would a family choose homeschooling? These are what's listed on this slide are just the typical benefits that families consider. So the biggest one I think is just individualized learning, and so I guess is the second option that Michelle mentioned, where the family, the parents usually take control over the curriculum, and you choose the curriculum that best suits the family, the child, their needs, their style. Everybody learns in different ways, so you have the option to choose that, and you have the option to go at a different pace. Maybe in some subject they're really advanced, you can accelerate. In some subjects they need more time, they need to really slow down and catch up. So you have that flexibility, and you also have the space um, to make you have the option to spend time on strengths and passions. So maybe someone is really talented and passionate about piano, they can put more time into that. Or maybe it's science, maybe it's art, maybe it's playing tennis. Whatever it is, you have more flexibility within the homeschooling, just because you don't stick to a certain schedule of 6 hours being in person in school. You have the flexibility. So I know, for example, a family that their kid is doing figure skating and like really good at figure skating. So you can make space for those kind of passions. As I said, doesn't have to be passions, could be academic strengths. There's more time for family relationships. So more time spending with parents, with siblings. And I think a key one for our families is accessibility and accommodations. So, for example, it goes hand in hand with the control of the curriculum. I choose curriculum and I choose teachers that I know their curriculum is accessible for my kids, that I know they're inclusive. I talk to them, and if I sense any red flag, we choose something else that I know will work. And you literally have the flexibility to change even mid-semester. If you
Mhm.
see that it's really not working, the curriculum, the materials are not accessible, the teacher, you can change even mid-semester. It's kind of hard for me. I have to remember to be flexible, like to take advantage of this because I like to start and finish, but that's definitely a benefit. Anything to add, Michelle?
I will say yes, that works. I homeschooled differently. So for me, I chose all of Emerson's curriculum and was the teacher. I did it up until high school when you're technically need to be credentialed. And for high school, while I chose the classes, this was a really good learning experience for herself and myself as well, because we didn't have any experience with the teachers and we needed to reach out. And she took the lead on that, reaching out, letting them know her accommodations, letting them know, her IEP and what was working and what wasn't working in the class. She did have a little issue where a class wasn't working, and she made the hard decision of dropping it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the teachers, when you're homeschooling, and you are the only blind student, right? You're the only person they've dealt with. So they don't know how to meet those expectations. So you really have to be advocating and staying on top of it, especially as they get older. I think that's what some parents, in the homeschool community learn. Like elementary, middle school, it's pretty simple. But as high school approaches, you really have to be knowing your weaknesses, your strengths, and how to advocate for yourself. That way you're not being left behind.
Yeah, totally. Um, so on the misconception side, and these are things that are, maybe they're partially true, right? So the first one, parents teach everything. You just mentioned, Michelle, that you actually did teach your daughter.
I did. It was just a personal preference.
Yeah,
Emerson's vision gradually declined. So for us, it just made sense. We were homeschooling. And then as her vision, got worse, then we decided to switch to a charter school for IEP purposes. Um, but I wouldn't say teaching everything is the best way to go, but I like to control things. So it
yeah.
just worked well for us.
Yeah. So some parents, and I think it's, as you say, it's easier to do that when they're in elementary school.
Mhm.
As they advance, it's harder
Yes,
to keep up with the knowledge in
correct.
each subject. But I outsource a lot. I love math, so I do math. It's a mixture of independent study and then me helping. But I outsource science, I outsource, and when I say outsource, it means I find a class, whether
Mhm.
it's in person or online. I find a class and a teacher and a curriculum that works. So generally, I would say it's a mix, but
Yeah.
I think it's rare that parents teach everything, especially as kids advance
Yes,
in
because then
age.
they also form groups of kids that they've taken classes with that they want to take another class with them.
Yeah,
They become friends in this online
yeah,
space. I mean, it's great if they're local, but honestly, the kids in the charter school, at least from what we've dealt with, have not been super local. They've been all over California, and it's been nice to form these, online friendships where you can reach out, circle back, and oh, you're in this class next semester. I'm taking this. Let's take it together. So it's been kind of neat that way.
yeah. The other misconception is that kids stay at home all day and they don't socialize. It's definitely harder to socialize, so I have to make an
Mhm.
effort to form these communities and find groups and organize activities or organize these learning pods. But but yeah, my kids don't stay home all day. One day they're in a nature program, they're in the forest all day. The other day they have a learning pod. The other day they go to a co-op where half the day they take classes and they do lunch with some friends. And 2 days, I guess they're home, but they have martial arts and other activities, so they interact with people. So
Yes.
it is different environment, so I think they're not as overwhelmed by all the socialization and all the friends and drama that happens in a brick and mortar school. I
Yes.
personally think that's a benefit for especially a middle school girl, which I have. um but yeah, so that's
Yeah, that I would
yeah.
absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. The other one is that homeschooling is basically unschooling, that is not academically rigorous. That's not true. I think, as I said, you can choose if you want to accelerate. So many
Mhm.
options to accelerate. Actually, you have the freedom. You don't have the school telling you, oh, your kid is in fifth grade, they can't do seventh grade math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there is
So,
testing that goes along with the charter schools. So, they're working with you to
yes.
ensure that your kid is on track. And if not, there's extra supports that, there's other things you can do, but there's always check-ins as well to ensure that, you're meeting the expectations. So no one's getting left behind.
Yeah, that's another, I guess, a topic that's a little bit controversial because I know some people don't like testing,
Which
and
we
sometimes
prefer.
testing is not fully accessible. I
Yes.
personally, for us so far, it's still accessible. So we do the state testing,
Yes.
and another iReady test. So those are accessible for my kids, and I really like the fact that we have a formal way. They're imperfect. They're not perfect. I know they're not perfect, but
No.
at least we have some way of making sure that we're not completely missing the key things they're supposed to be
Elements,
learning.
yes. And I will say to that, I actually opted out of testing. So
Okay.
the only testing my student has done is the California state testing that's
Okay.
required, SATs and ACTs. But as far as checking in with the school's testing, we opted out because for her, it doesn't feel accessible and she stresses out.
No.
Either she,
Yes.
is pushed to do Braille or she's in that kind of in between bucket visually that either way works. And it just stresses her out, have to make a choice really fast. So she opted out, no testing. But we weren't worried about her academics, especially for high school, because there is graded work at that time.
Yeah.
We knew she was meeting her milestones.
Yeah. Yeah. In high school, you have clear signals.
Yes.
Um, The other one is most homeschooling families homeschool for religious reasons. Again, I'm sure there are
Mhm.
families where this is important or vaccine is exemptions, but that's the community that I see is just, I think this is a minority from my
Yeah.
experience.
Agree. Absolutely.
Um, and then the last one is that homeschool students can't get special education services or accommodations, which we've already touched on, and I guess we'll talk more about. But
Yeah.
both Michelle and I are getting services through the public charter school. And, I mean, obviously money is an element, but if you do it privately, I know you could pay privately. It's a lot of money. It adds
Yeah,
up.
you do pay privately. For us, for example, we are in a school district, and the way they do it is they can assess your child for free. Absolutely, they do the assessments for free. However, if you want the services, since you are not a registered member of the school district, you do pay out of pocket
Yeah.
for O&M, TVI,
Yeah.
equipment that is needed for education purposes. So while you can do it,
Yeah. It's very
it's
expensive.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah. So that's kind of the all general notes we had, and then we already shared a little bit. But Michelle, do you want to talk more about your experience, and then I'll talk a little bit about
Sure.
mine and
My daughter I have two children. One went all the way up through traditional education. They are not visually impaired. And then my daughter, she went to TK. So we started out, we tried TK and it was good, but she was bored, to be honest. And so after TK, we're like, let's see what homeschooling has to offer. So I decided to look into it a little bit and I filed a PSA, which means it's a private school affidavit. I'm required to fill it out once a year and submit it to the state. And in that regard, I chose her curriculum. However, with choosing her curriculum, it was great. She was moving ahead. She was doing what she needed to do. But as her vision declined, services weren't being rendered. We knew at some point she would need more than what I could provide as service wide. So we decided to find a charter school. And so I researched and we happened to find one that worked well for us. The requirements were fairly easy. We just needed to sign up, pick our curriculum. But the harder part came when we were filing for the IEP. Not that they weren't willing to give an IEP, not that they didn't want to work with her, but she was the first visually impaired student for the charter school. And so that means they didn't know what to do. They had no idea. So they had a contract with other companies to be able to provide. They had a special education department, but they just didn't have a visually impaired student. I will say the first year or two of working with them and trying to get everything dialed in was a challenge because having a newly blind student and them not having a blind student meant I'm looking online, I'm talking to other people, trying to understand what services she's entitled to. We actually did visit the California School for the Blind and decided that wasn't the perfect fit for her because she actually prefers learning alone in her own way. So we went up through elementary and middle school with the charter school. And that time we're still choosing curriculum, working with them for services. And then high school is where things changed for us. Our daughter decided to do what's called dual enrollment for high school and college. So she was primarily taking all her courses that are required for high school. She was taking them at the college, which was wonderful because not only is she getting college credit, she's also getting high school credit. And the college they do things differently. So they don't have an IEP. They basically take your IEP and give you accommodations. And getting those accommodations are easy. They've worked with plenty of blind students. But then my role steps back because, at a college level, the student has to be responsible for themselves. So for the last, I would say, 3 years of high school career, she kind of drove her own. We had a goal of what we needed to meet. She knew what the expectation was in order to graduate early. She knew what AG requirements she needed, and she knew what she needed to do. So the most challenging part of that is, kind of taking the back seat and letting her lead. But at the same time, it gave her great experience on advocating for herself. It gave her great experience of learning to mesh with other students that are not visually impaired. The world's not set up for visually impaired kids. So to learn to group yourself with other individuals that are not visually impaired is, it's a little bit of a learning curve. Um, but she's done well. She graduated early. She's well on her way to college. And I would say for me, homeschooling was definitely the right move. I never thought in a million years I'd homeschool. We just weren't those parents. We weren't doing it for religious reasons, for vaccine reasons, none of those. We were just doing it because she felt like she wasn't getting what she needed academically at kindergarten. Going to a school where your peers are sightseeing and they're not really understanding, but at that time you don't have the vocabulary to explain. So she was falling a little bit behind, just because she wasn't speaking up. And, while she had TVI services, they weren't in a classroom setting with her. The services are being provided a couple hours here and there outside of a classroom. So that just didn't work. So, we decided to homeschool, and every year we check in. We're like, hey, would you like to go back? And every year it's been, no, absolutely not. What are you thinking? And as we transition to middle school, she's like, oh, please, I'm not dealing with the drama of this. And
Right,
for us,
right.
she has friends that, go to traditional education that she's good friends with, that she has met at camps. Emerson's still well versed in doing STEM camps and things such as that with sightseeing kids. And that way she has the best of both worlds. She's making friends who are sighted. She's making friends who are blind. Our blind friends come from groups online. They come from our local Vista Center, the teen groups. So I think just giving her a wealth of knowledge and letting her passions drive her has been great for her learning. I've never been worried that she's falling behind, because there are those academic check-ins, especially in high school levels. You're having to pass tests, you're having to move forward, or else, you fail essentially. We chose the A to G pathway, so there's more rigorous testing and more rigorous academics for her, for honors and such. So I think when you homeschool, there's so many different ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way. It's just really directed to your student and meeting them where they're at and following their lead. Obviously, you want them to learn. No one's saying that. But at the end of the day, you have a lot more control of the information they're learning and the pace that they're going. For us, math has always been like such a hard thing for her to grasp. But when we test her, she's off the charts in language arts, but the math has always been behind. And, we've never made it a big deal. We're like, you'll get there. You'll learn it. It will be fine. We're, constantly in that classroom setting, she would feel behind. So we kind of took away that feeling of not meeting expectations and just moved at her pace for whatever subject she was struggling with or was able to get extra resources. And the other thing with the charter school and having an IEP, we were able to obtain equipment that she needs. She needed a CCTV, she needed a brailler, she needed these items to learn. And then we had a wonderful TVI, for the last, 4 or 5 years. And that worked really well. So I don't think there's a wrong way of homeschooling. I just think there's a lot of missed information, of what you perceive. And I even had those misconceptions when we started homeschooling. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to be the weird kid. No, it's far from the truth. So far. So let me know if you guys have any questions. It's been great homeschooling. I would do it again. I never thought I'd say that either, but I would definitely do it again.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. I can share just a few minutes so we can open it up. Um, like I said, I have two middle schoolers, both with visual impairment. Um, and like I said, we were in public neighborhood, brick and mortar. My daughter finished fifth grade. And, it was a struggle with getting services. And when you're in that space of having some vision but not having vision, there's so much misunderstanding. We struggled a lot in our school here with that. And yeah, it was really, really stressful and emotionally difficult for her and for me.
Mhm.
Um, Even though we got to the point where we had a very solid IEP in place and we had a wonderful TVI and we had the resources and the services and the equipment, it just felt like the community was not understanding and accepting and truly inclusive. And she was getting uh, a lot of signals that she's very perceptive. So direct or indirect that, oh, you don't matter, you don't need this. Um, and a lot of signals like, well, it's your fault, you need to advocate. But when she would advocate, they would do nothing and not, right? So then what is going to happen to that child? I thought if she's going to keep going like this, she's not going to advocate, right? So when it came from middle school, kind of looking at our local middle school and looking at, her strength academically and then all the social drama with middle school, and just knowing her. So she's very driven, very curious, very just a natural learner. I thought, what am I going to lose if we're just going to try homeschooling for a year? We're not going to lose anything because I know for sure she's going to read whatever 100 books or something. So she's not going to lose much. So that's how we tried homeschooling. We stepped into it. Same with the charter school. I guess the charter school got more experience or got learned because our experience in terms of the IEP process has been amazing. The fact that their philosophy is that they're parent led, I just immediately felt a huge difference in terms of really collaborative, truly collaborative and respectful interactions. And whatever it is that we need to figure out, it really feels like we're figuring it out. I don't know. How do I make this test accessible to this kid?
Yep.
It doesn't feel like it's a fight, which for me has been an immense relief of my time and energy. And it's great. It's going great for us. Like I said, I pick classes that are accessible, teachers that I talk to them and I say, can you share the slides? Can you give her Google Docs? And they're looking at me as like, oh, that's not an issue. I have it in Google Docs, so no problem. I'll not print one copy. It's fine. So we really had a great experience with the teachers we found in the classes, and it's really going really well. We have friends. We're part of these communities. Like I said, it's work to put it all together. And I think you have to try it. It doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for every family. It doesn't work for every parent and child. Um, but especially in the earlier years, I wouldn't try it in high school, but in the earlier years, if it's, I don't regret. I mean, yeah, um, try and get out. And then for us, it does work. It's great. We can, like I said, we can take the classes that are at the right level and the right interest and so on. So yeah, I know we actually used more time than we were planning. So maybe we stop. Do you want to stop here? Olivia, do you wanna stop here and then we can have an open discussion with the group?